Thank you for tuning in to Stampscaping 101. This is a scene that's kind of a compilation of the two previous scenes that I've done, lessons, where I've done these light rays coming out within kind of a tree trunk composition. And then the last scene that I did, last lesson too, was where I used those aspen trees. I wanted to create kind of the shimmering, glowing, colored light type of effect. And after I did that one, I thought, you know, it'd be kind of interesting to have these stronger, kind of bold pillars within a scene to complement the lighter, airy fall golden trees that I did in the previous scene. So I wanted to see what that would look like, and these tree trunks were stamped out first, and I just kind of stamped these ones in back of it to kind of create the framework. It's almost like these windows, you know, in the space between the tree trunks to hopefully I wanted to enhance the tree trunks, okay? I mean the aspens, by having this kind of darker framework around it. So and then I wanted to see what, you know, those beams of light would look like in front of the lighter trees, lighter background trees, going into these darker trees like this, okay? And I think that's kind of fun to do it like that, you know, because you could barely see the beams in front of the lighter trees because the contrast isn't so much, but then you hit this bolder, dark tree trunk type of area, and then the beams are very apparent, okay? So you get these kind of contrasts, but they all kind of work together because, you know, you have these beams running across both of them from background to foreground. Seemingly so, though of course these are all two-dimensional things that we're doing here, but it looks like it's coming out straight at you, okay? So, combination of both. If you watched any of the previous two, you can kind of see where that's taken me here. If you choose to watch the video, I hope you enjoy it, and hope you enjoy the kind of effects here of adding those types of rays into your scenes. They're really fun to do, and I really recommend trying it out. Okay, in the last two videos, I've been testing out the use of pigmenting for the purpose of creating these light beams. And I did this one just a really quick, I don't know, I guess it's a stamp sketch. It's just a really quick grayscale composition, and I laid in those light beams, which I thought were really effective against that kind of darker background and darker objects. This one was an example on a lighter value range, and I was thinking that the two of these together might be kind of interesting, you know, to have these larger tree trunks providing, and darker tree trunks providing a framework for some of these lighter kind of I don't know, kind of iridescent, really not iridescent, but kind of lighter leafy backlit objects, okay? And I wanted to try something with that. I want to see what those two kind of elements could combine to create, okay? So I'll try to do this one quickly, and I'll try to set up the compositional framework of this scene in quick order. Should be fairly easy to do. Okay. This is the tree trunk. It's a very bold design. I usually have the tree trunks running off the top of my page, right, like that. If you have a little bit of space up here, you can go like that, but I wouldn't use too much of the top portion of it probably, although you could, you know, but you just match up edge to edge if you have a really tall piece, and, you know, you don't want the the image to end abruptly within the scene. Okay. And just to provide a little bit of variation, we can go with the tree trunk trio, some smaller trees like so. Doesn't matter really where you place it. You can have it even going off of the page if you want to. You don't always have to have the entire width of a scenic stamp in a scene. You can have it running off the edge of the page if you want to. That's the nature, so to speak, no pun intended, of scenic stamping. You can use certain portions for what you want. Okay, and we can go with another tree. Speaking of that, why don't I have this one kind of coming in from the edge? You can take and you can stamp out additional trees if you want to, like this one independent from these two right here. You can just stamp out more of those ones, or you can just stamp out those, or if you wanted this trunk right here, you don't have to color up that one or this one, and you can have kind of a, you know, just a single stamp from that stamp image. Okay, now let's see. I thought I would add in something like this. I think that would look kind of interesting to have a really brightly colored stamp amongst these taller trees, or this one could also represent something in the background. I think I'll make it, putting it a little bit lower kind of puts it amongst the taller trees though. Could be a different tree, could be a sapling, who knows. It's whatever you really want it to be. Okay, let's see here. Now on this one here I'm going to use color to define it. I'll use some different tones in here. Instead of just coloring it in one color, I like to use multiple colors. Okay, I'll use a little bit of brown, a little bit of green. Okay, and you can do it in somewhat of a kind of random type of application. I'll put some yellow into it, like a aspen or other type of deciduous, showy tree. Adding a little bit more dark brown. Anyways, when you color things like this, you really get a kind of a nice, almost random, I wouldn't say, I don't know, maybe random's not the right word, but kind of unpredictable result when you stamp these things out. Just because it's really hard to say how much of one color you've used on it, how wet a certain pen is in relation to the other one, how much you're kind of removing when you add in light on top of dark too, you know. Sometimes you stamp it out and it's like completely dark, but I tried to, this yellow pen was a little bit more juicy than some of these other ones, so it's probably, you know, removing some of those darker colors on there, especially when I was rolling off some of that color off my tip right here and then going back into it and scribbling around. Alright, now with this impression, I think I want to have it as though it's behind these trees, okay? If I stamp it right over the top of it, I'll have some of this image going right into these tree trunks right here. And I don't want that, okay, because it's not going to be opaque, it's going to be transparent. So if I stamped it right over the top of these trees are going to be showing through it, you know, completely. So what I'm going to do is I'll just mask off these trees, kind of undermask it a little bit so that maybe you'll have a little bit of that color going into the tree, just so you don't get these big spaces in between you don't want this big gap in between these trunks and the tree, okay? It's okay if you have a little bit of this going into the into your trunks, into the foreground, because we're going to darken the foreground anyway, okay? We're going to apply some tone to those tree trunks. So if you get a little of this bleed into those tree trunks, it's not going to be a problem. I don't know, it's never a problem for me, because that type of thing doesn't bother me if I see a little bit of color in there. Okay, so here we have that. Alright. And let's get some more of that interspersed throughout here, okay? Go with the same colors. Oops. This one right here. These are the Marvy brush markers. They have a really big, wide tip. And they hold a ton of ink, so they're very juicy. Really good for stamps with a lot of surface area. Okay. We'll mask off this tree on this side. I won't be stamping it. I won't be making an impression with very much of this design. Okay. Okay. That is just really fun stuff. I love having color just inherently in the impressions themselves. And the variations that can be achieved that way. You know, you're working with dye-based inks, so it's like you've applied a little bit of like watercolors, you know, to your stamps, and then they stamp out with that kind of watercolor looking look to them. And you know, the characteristic of watercolors is that they're a little bit more kind of free-form and spontaneous, and I think that's a good look to go with impressions, you know, stamps, because stamps are, you know, when we color them up or we use a pad with them, they're fairly, you know, everything's fairly crisp and deliberate, but when you introduce that element of kind of I don't know, spontaneity and randomness, you're kind of introducing or having another type of spirit to your pieces, which I think is always a good thing to have. Okay, now this one right here, I'm not gonna bother masking off that really narrow tree trunk right there. I'm just going to put it right over the top of that. I'll try to darken in that trunk later on, but you know, kind of masking that off is not my idea of fun, so it's just that real narrow strip. So I'm just going to stamp this right over the top, and hopefully it looks like it's in the back. It's going to be showing up in the trunk, but you just darken the trunk later, and it'll push this Aspen towards the back, at least in theory, so hopefully that comes into play, and that should. Okay, so we have that going on right now. Okay, and I tell you what, why don't we do something like this? Let's add some more of these trees, and hopefully we'll put it, you know, like it appears to be in the back. Now here's what I'm doing. I inked it up from the top to bottom, and I'm going lighter. I'm just going with that yellow up there. And I'm wiping off this bottom portion, okay? This is all dry down here. And then as I move up here, I'm removing a little bit of ink, but less, okay? So there's complete removal down here, a little bit of removal here, and then up here it's fully saturated, okay? You know, pure application of ink. So we have this going from wet, medium to dry, okay? So if I put this right here, it's a little bit wetter up here and a little bit drier down here. It's almost the same value, but it'll appear like it's behind that, okay? And then let's do the same thing again. I'll just ink up half of this because that's all I'm going to use, but down here, completely dry, and removing partial ink from here to here, okay? So it's wet, medium, dry. Okay, so hopefully it looks dark, lighter down here, okay? Although I'm you know, it's yellow, so it's never going to be like terribly light, dark, but just a darker version of that yellow, okay? See that? We have that nice variation in there. Darker, lighter like that as it moves down into here. The reason why I do that is because if it's that same value up here as down here, the silhouette of these first impressions won't show up as much. You know, it'll just kind of blend in with that. It might be light enough where it's not going to be a problem, but why not get a little bit of variation in there? When you have that variation of value like that, I think the end result of your piece can be that much more richer looking in appearance when you have that variation. And I mean, this is a simple thing to do here. You know, it's a simple little technique that can, you know, lend itself to that type of varied look. Okay. Like that. Okay, see where that is? Darker and a little bit lighter down here, where the bottom of that meets these first impressions. Okay. Alright, so hopefully that provides a nice framework for this composition. The idea of this composition is it's kind of like this framework, and then you have this, you know, it's to give this kind of feeling of a, you know, this natural kind of a nature's stained glass type of look. You know, with fall foliage. Alright, just filling in the bottom here with the Sedge filler. Okay, so let's see here. Let's make this easy, okay? I've been playing around with things like grayscale compositions. Let's just apply some gray. This is a Memento London Fog. It's a nice slippery, kind of thick ink. I'll add some browns into here too, but I'll just kind of establish somewhat of a grayscale lighting scheme in here, okay? And you'll see how fast this is to kind of establish here. Sometimes I like to create some shadows, or most of the times with these trees here. See this kind of little passageway of light coming through here? Okay. when people are first starting off with scenic stamping and you know, they're playing around the color application, a lot of times they lighting is kind of the thing that I've heard the most comments on over the years. You know, people get the technique of the color application down there, you know, and they've commented me, you know, like, the one thing that they don't have down is lighting yet. So one of the things I do is I kind of color the things that are dark inherently in the designs first, okay? Because if they're dark, they probably represent shadow or something like that. Then, where those objects are sitting in the composition, I typically add shadow to the base of them, okay? Like that. Just right around the base of them. Now in a scene like this one's kind of specialized right here. I'm going to have it backlit, but I'll leave some area, typically in the middle of the scene somewhere, a little bit lighter, okay? And I have a video on that, easy lighting schemes. There's typically this area of light up here, and then there's typically an area of light down below. Now in this one right here, we have this thick grove of trees, so there's not a big area of light down here, but just kind of leaving a little area somewhere down below kind of creates that idea of a light source and reflected light, okay? So two areas of light. I mean, sometimes it's not, you know, just cut and dry like that, but for the most part, if you look at most of my scenes that I've done, they kind of fall into that kind of that lighting scheme, that easy lighting scheme. Sometimes it's a tiny little area, you know, as far as my light source, you know, a little bit of sunlight peeking through the clouds above, illuminating, you know, a meadow or a lake, something like that. And in this case, maybe it's just, you know, a little bit of light kind of peeking through the background, you know, this little area down here. But if you kind of leave two areas of light, you're you know, you'll be good. One area above and one below, and you can position them wherever you want them to be. It could be on the left side. It doesn't have to be in the center of your scene. But that's, you know, that's one kind of approach you can take. That's just very, very simple and basic, and can be effective for, you know, really all of your scenes if you want to do it that way. And then you start getting a little bit more specific, you know. The more you kind of start doing them, you can have multiple areas illuminated within a scene. You kind of have to think about it like this, though. This is much easier to think about lighting within landscapes, okay? A lot of people think about it in terms of when they're doing this type of thing, they're thinking about it in terms of, okay, if my light is then there, then where would it fall over here? Would it be over here? Would it be over here? Which you can do, but I think it's better if you kind of think about it. Now, I don't think any of us have ever done this before. I mean, how many lighting directors are there for like plays, you know, that they're watching this right now? I mean, I'm not doing it, but just in terms of the concept of it, you know, think about these scenes that you're doing like stages, okay? And this really frees you up as well. It's kind of the mindset that I'm talking about here is, okay, what do you want to be illuminated and what do you want to be darker, okay? So if you're kind of a lighting director, you know, or stage director, whatever, on a play, okay, and you have, you know, something over here, one of your stars of the screen is over here, and one, you know, another one's over here. You want the spotlights on those two characters, right? Or if that character is on a stage, you know, there's a set and they are inside their house or something like that, okay? And one of them's sitting at the table eating in the kitchen. You want that kitchen to be illuminated, right? And that's over here. And then there's another person over here, maybe watching TV or something like that, and maybe they're talking with each other. Okay, you want those two areas to be lit, but in the middle, you know, it might be subdued, it might be darker, okay? And it's not because that's the way nature is or that's the way a house would be, but that you're just kind of drawing attention to whatever you want, you know, your audience to be looking at, and you don't want them to be kind of distracted by anything else. You want there to be a strong focal point, okay? So, that being said, you can really have your scene however you want it to be in terms of the illumination of it, okay? You don't have to follow any type of, you know, natural lighting convention that you would be subject to in replicating something that you think would be from nature, okay? And that just makes it easier. It makes it, that's the way I do it, you know. I just try to, I don't necessarily try to make things look natural. I just try to, the only thing that really matters is if it looks good, you know, to your eye. So, it's really you know, it really frees you up. And, you know, when you do something like that, it puts the concern where I think it, you know, is better served in a scene, you know, just thinking about, okay, what, you know, what do you want the viewer to look at? You know, we're talking about very small compositions, typically in card, you know, in card sizes. Okay, I'm adding in brown, by the way. I'm just toning some of these trees a little bit. See, like that? I mean, look at that background. These are kind of nice framing devices for that background of color. The color's really popping now. But, yeah, you don't have to, we're not subject to, I don't know, natural convention when we're doing this. We're freed up, you know, in terms of being the developers of our own worlds here. These are worlds unto themselves, you know. They're not, you don't have to look like a snapshot of nature. I don't know, someone once told me that don't try to replicate what the camera can do much more effectively, you know. Do the things that, you know, you have an advantage over as the creator of a certain piece, okay? So you can think about these like a, I don't know, like a landscape painter would or something. You know, a landscape painter isn't going to spend, go out in nature and, you know, even if they are, you know, trying to capture, you know, a certain look of a certain location, let's say they're painting out on location, they're not trying to replicate just what they see. They're not going to spend, you know, hours working on this painting for something that, you know, a Polaroid camera can capture in a, you know, a 1/25th of a second or something like that. They're, you know, you want to end, you know, you want to kind of introduce something of yourself into that, you know, interpretation of that scene that they're at. Okay, this is some, what's the name of this one? Peeled paint. I love this green. From the Tim Holtz Distress. And see, I'm just doing the same type of thing. I'm adding it to the base of the tree. I added it to the tree so that there's some variation. A lot of times I don't like to just go brown trunk, green grass, you know, multicolored trees in the background. You kind of want to utilize some of these colors in various areas to bring continuity. So if you have kind of a little bit of green or a lot of green down at the base, then use it in the tree as well. If the tree is brown, use some of that brown from the tree down in the grass, and that gives, you know, kind of a whole type of look to your color schemes. Alright, now, one of the things that I haven't addressed yet is the sky area, and I'm wondering what I must have a really dark fingerprint. I have a dark fingerprint right there. Oh well. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to add those light beams into here somewhere, but I'm trying to think if I want to add some color to that sky and what color that would be. We could go for a blue. It could just be gray. How about gray and blue, okay? I use the gray, you know, all throughout those trees, so let's try that. Okay, let me see. I need a clean stylus tool. I'm going to be doing more on that forest floor, but let's do that sky first. I want to go for a little bit of variation down here with some other imagery. But, I don't know, this scene came together pretty fast. What time are we on? 30 minutes, I think? Half an hour. And a lot of it was me kind of pondering, so... Okay, let's see. Ooh, that is really moist. There's a lot of water in this right here. Let me get out a lot of that moisture here. And there's a little bit of blue in it from the last time I used the tip here. Okay, but again, this is the London fog once again. So let's say this is I don't know. Sometime in the AM, maybe, when, you know, the light is just kind of coming out. Or I don't know, maybe it's out, but it's a little bit of a foggy day, perhaps. And I'm darkening my corners that I like to do to just kind of contain the scene, compositionally speaking, as far as the composition goes. And I'll put the light beams coming out from kind of right in here, kind of some of the lighter, could be over here too. So maybe I'll leave this application of the gray in this area a little bit lighter. Okay. Okay. Go like that. Okay. That's a little bit more bluish gray than the London fog is in actuality, but that's okay because I was going to use some blue in there anyway. Let's try summer sky. Okay, how about a little Bahama blue? This one's pretty bright, so maybe I don't want it too bright. So I'll blot it off a little bit first, like that. and use more of a dry brush, dry sponge, I guess, application of it into the scene. Okay. I'll actually bring some of this blue into here as well. I mean, I could have done it with the lighter blues as well. But one of the things I always say is add a little bit of continuity to, you know, as far as that color scheme goes. And that's not something that we would really think about doing. Oh wait, you know, blue in the tree trunk, why, you know, why are we doing that? But you see this little tiny hint of blue right in here? I don't know if you can tell. See that little bluish tinge, okay? I think it gives a little bit of continuity to this area up here, and when we look at it, it's not like, oh my gosh, there's a blue, you know, blue grass or something like that, okay? It's just, there's a little hint of it here. So we're kind of carrying on that idea of that certain colored light, you know, coming from up here, shining down. It kind of shimmers with that same sort of lighting color scheme, I guess. Alright, let's add a little bit of texture to our forest floor. Forest floor looks okay to me down here as is, right? But I like more texture than that. So let's see, you can take a black pad, or I'll go with the dark brown. A dark brown. Distress ink, you can use like a walnut stain or something. But actually, this I think this is the dark brown that I used to stamp out the Sedge filler stamp. I love the tiny rock stamp. Okay, so that adds a little bit more texture down there. It's a little bit more rich of a surface, okay? Potentially. Okay, and trying to think if I want anything else in here in terms of the foreground. Okay, I might add something later, but what I'm thinking about is if I add some beams of light coming in here, which I'm going to do right now, I'll probably have it coming down here, but I don't want, you know, a freshly stamped black image right down here to kind of smear. There's a difference between stamping on just a, you know, a fresh piece of, you know, paper and one that's been coated in so many layers of ink right now. You know, if I stamp out something right there right now over the top of this isn't wet to the touch or anything like that, but the pulp of the paper is a little bit damp, so it, you know, it takes a little bit of while to dry completely. So let's just start adding in our effects here. Effects meaning the pigment ink application. I'm looking for that tip that I've been using for my pigment ink. It should be nice and white. Here it is, right here. There's my one stylus tool for my pigment ink. Alright, let's pick out a spot right here for the light rays. Let's choose right, how about in between there? I have like a little bit of my fingerprint there. Literally. Okay, there's a little bit of, I have a smudge right there. I'm going to use that as my point of, kind of my vanishing point for some light beams running across here. And I love doing this type of effect. I think it's just really dramatic of an element. Okay, here's my color box. This is a fairly dry color box pad, okay? If you're using a new one, watch out. The whole kind of a technique of adding this is about the amount of ink that you have on your tip right here, on your sponge or whatever applicator you're using, okay? It's about having kind of a drier application of it on here, okay? So you don't want to add a lot. Now I can go right in here, and this thing is really dry, so I can just go straight into my pad right here. I can actually kind of smash that in there, and I hardly have anything coming out of it or applying to the paper because it's just so dry on the tip here. So, but if you have kind of a bit of a newer pad, just be careful about your application amount, okay? If you're going with a wet pad, then don't dab it in there too hard, just lightly tap it and blot it off a lot, okay? Alright, now I have this I'm avoiding some of these trees and I'm putting it over the top of some of the trees here, so it looks like it's kind of behind some trees and coming out in the front of other trees, so you get this kind of dimensional aspect, okay? This right here, so this light beam coming across, it's like I put it behind this one and in front of this one, okay? Kind of wipe this off a little bit where it went on this tree. Okay, come down here, about like so, and I'll do the same type of thing. Maybe I'll put it behind these two trunks and maybe in front of this one, I don't know. It's just like the passage of light, whatever's kind of not blocking it off, it'll seep through. Okay, just like that. See that right there? I put it in front of these trees and in back of this one, where in this beam right in back here went in back of this trunk right here. So you can really kind of play around with that and don't overanalyze it, It just kind of, you don't have to worry about that. It's kind of a little bit more random in many ways, just from having certain things blocking off certain things. And it's really, again, just like anything else in a scene that you do, it's really just wherever you want it to go. Now I've been doing this kind of one sheet thing, and I can come in and I can create kind of a more defined beam by blocking off kind of the top and bottom, like so. So there's like one very defined streak, maybe. Maybe I'll have it going in front of all the trees, like it's kind of coming at you. There was nothing kind of obstructing it, so we'll see what it looks like, If I don't like it, I can just kind of rub it off, which is the beauty of doing this on glossy. Okay. Something like that. Kind of have one coming down this way, maybe. Kind of having this, see this kind of like broken beam too. I find that looks more natural. I was looking at some actual photographs. I thought, maybe if I'm going to be doing this, I should actually reference some photos. And yeah, all the beams are just kind of broken up, you know. And I thought that, okay, that's what I needed to do. That's what I wasn't doing. I was having these like solid beams in these early ones that I was doing. When I say early ones, it was like, you know, just a few days ago. But doing something like this is just, it was more natural looking. Okay, let's see here. Let's say that I have some beams that are just, you know, we don't see up here, but they're just kind of created down here. Okay, let's see. That. Decisions. Alright. What I was trying to, or what's going through my mind right now is I'm just kind of wondering if I should do this over other areas. Okay, let's see. Let's do this right here. Let's have kind of a light beam down here. One of these days when I figure out what I'm doing, we'll have a light beam anatomy video where I can kind of better direct it. But right now it's just kind of trial and error. I haven't had too many errors though, because I'm finding that wherever I put this it looks, you know, halfway decent. Kind of the half beam, though, kind of was one of the things that I've kind of discovered I thought looked a little bit better than the full beam in many areas. You know, so it's like a kind of like a curtain, you know, of light in a way. I'm putting my saturation of this heavier right along the edge of my paper, okay? And I'm making it a little bit more random, like I'm making the beam like heavier in one area, and then I'll skip and I'll put, you know, some more. So it doesn't have to be so uniform, and that's the thing that I was doing The first couple times I did that, it was a little bit too uniform, I think. Okay, see this right here? It's kind of like hanging like that, like a little curtain, you know? And I think that looks kind of interesting. I like the idea of kind of bisecting this aspen right here. A little bit of tone, like a light beam is kind of coming through it. Makes it look a little bit more kind of that backlit iridescence. Okay, like that. See that right there? I think that's really nice right in here. Oh, let's take a look at these trees over here. Okay. This beam is just going to be like a ½ inch or so. Just like a partial. Okay, like that. And I don't know if this one will even show up here, but something like that. It's just kind of a hint of it over here, huh? Trying to decide. Okay, let me go one more. Right in here, I think. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Does it look interesting enough? I think it looks okay. Okay, I'm going to add a bunch of this pigment ink right in here. Okay, and again, watch out if you have a pretty new pad or one that just has a lot of ink in it still. Okay. And what I'm doing is I'm adding a lot of this lighting right in here, just kind of diffusing some of those objects in that kind of bright sunlight. Because it gives it that hazy kind of glowing appearance, where something is getting kind of bathed in light. And again, it's all about kind of doing a dry brush. You know, there's very little on here, so that's really key to applying this like this. Okay, you don't want a bunch of blobs everywhere. And if there is kind of a difficulty in applying this, it's never about, someone's application is just about too much ink on their applicator. Okay. You can add some of this at the base down here. Putting a little bit of mist. It's when you add this mist too, and it's light like that, you're adding lighting to your scene. It's like one of those instances where you can actually add light on top of dark. Boy, that sure looks bright. It creates kind of a nice illusion, I guess, of cast light when you add those light beams in here. I think it would look okay without the beams, but I don't know. Look at that haze down here now. See, that's why we left a little bit of area light down there, right? So we have light up here, light right here. Light and light. So I think we're getting somewhere. We're making some progress in terms of I don't know, whatever, technique development, scenic stamping, lighting technique development. Okay. Winter brush here, in terms of something kind of crisp at the base. Down here, creating kind of a foreground. Right now with the tree trunks were my foreground, but I want something even closer to my eye. Okay. But I don't want to cover up everything I've done in the background, so you do these kind of spindlier, you know, skeletal types of images down below like this. So you have something a little bit closer. We have something nice and crisp to match up with the kind of that hazier type of imagery going on in the background. Okay, like that. So you can see those little crisp little branches down there. Anyway, let's see. Yeah, getting a little bit of a glare. Here we go. Still glary. Fun. So it's a combination of those last two. So, the contrasting types of images. You have something very kind of bold and heavy in tone against something that could be bold and heavy in tone too. I mean, I could stamp that out in, you know, spring greens and things when, you know, these trees are just full of their new leaves and whatnot, okay? But if you stamp them out in light tones, okay, light hue, and certainly light values of those existing hue, it can look very delicate and airy, and then made airier, having kind of these pigment ink applications applied to it in the form of just some overall haze, okay? But also certainly with these light beams like that, okay? And that can really give the scenes, you know, a certain focal point and, you know, a visual lead-in, and it might be hard for me to not use these light beam effects for a while, because I'm certainly having a fun time doing it. And I'm also kind of learning how to use them, you know, like this. See, I would have carried this, just last week, I would have carried this beam completely across here in a very, you know, straightforward beam like that, okay? But now, just kind of letting it hang a little bit like that and kind of having it fade out. So just using less ink, it's not harder to do. It's just putting less down, less ink, you know. I think that looks kind of more effective. It's saying that, you know, that trail of beam has been broken off probably by some, you know, some leaves or some canopy of, you know, leaves up above. But it just, I don't know, I think it looks more oh, I guess natural or something like that to do that. And just leaving some areas light up here and, you know, kind of oscillating it right back here. We have it in front of this tree, we have it in back of this tree. Here's this beam coming up from behind this tree here, but in front of it down here, you know, where you have these different layers going on in here. So this is just, it's a lot of fun, and you can create just kind of this dynamic element, you know, in your scenes where it's kind of called for, and I would certainly do some compositions if I were you where it's called for because it's just too fun to, you know, to, I don't know, to not do. I think what I want to do too is I've been doing this as far as the lighthouse scenes, you know, very definitive imagery for, you know, the use of some of these beams of light. But I think I want to do it in some kind of forced applications, like, you know, a moon or something like that, where maybe you wouldn't see these, you know, real super definitive beams of light, but I think you can just enhance and kind of isolate anything within a scene and to really bring attention to it by putting these beams behind it like that. It's just a very dramatic look to add into just about any type of imagery, scenic or not, you know. Like I was mentioning before, word stamps would be kind of interesting. I need to see if I have a quote in the Scenic Sentiments that has to do with the sun, you know. Like if I stamped out something reverse text right here, it would be kind of interesting, or sunlight, or, you know, morning light or something like that would be kind of interesting to do in here. Something like this down here too. I mean, if I had little figures, that would be kind of interesting down here. You know, little figurines. We can still stamp, you know, some little subject matter in there. Oh, you know, here's a bird. Can you imagine? Now, I wouldn't do it in here, but this hawk right here. If you did a scene with some clouds and that hawk was flying in front of it, or this eagle, I should say, and you have these beams of light coming out from behind it, it would look, you know, fairly majestic, I guess you could say. And I don't know. It's like these beams of light are, it's like kind of getting another stamp, you know, that you can use in a scene, and you can use it in just about any scene, so it's very universal as long as you have some kind of light source. So oh yeah, I was thinking about it around some stars, you know, some of my like star cluster stamp or something like that. It might be kind of interesting. So anyways, I can go on and on here. Fun stuff. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. If you watched the previous two, you can see kind of where, I don't know, this has come together in a new composition as far as the tree trunks and those aspens in there. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And again, if you have any questions, you can check out our Stampscapes.com website, or just drop me a note in the comment section below.